Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Julie Holunga. She is a leadership trainer, TEDx speaker, coach, and she's also an author. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you, AJ, for having me.
You are welcome to the show, Julie. You are welcome to India once again in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we'll be talking about. We will understand about the power of leadership, language, and how people can stop allowing their language to undermine their impact. So, my first question, here Julie will be to understand one thing. You have been in New Delhi. You have grew up also in New Delhi. So I want to understand about your New Delhi connection, and then we'll come to the topic.
Okay, sure. So I grew up overseas. My dad at the time was working for Citibank. And so when I was 6 years old, we left New York and moved to Paris. And we were there for 3 years before moving to India. My family, we all talk about India being, a 2.5-year vacation that we just loved living there. We loved the people, we loved the culture, and we had such a wonderful experience. And we are still friends with people that we grew up with in India. And now actually we've ended up in the same town outside of Denver, Colorado, which is funny, but we have such a great experience from that time and wonderful memories of traveling throughout the country and really getting to know the culture. My mother says the highlight of her time was meeting Zubin Mehta. And so that was a while ago, but just absolutely loved meeting him and speaking with him.
Wonderful, wonderful. Nice to know about these things. The years passed by, but then these are the memories you carry, and you look at the future, it's also in that light. Great to understand. Wonderful. Now coming back to the topic, the power of leadership language. What does this power of leadership language mean about? Should leaders, or they say, your car defines you, your suit defines you, everything defines you. Is the language, do they need to speak, a different type of language, strong words? Help us understand this leadership language so that people can actually put on the right sort of impact and not the wrong sort of impact.
Right. And so this all stems from my interest and really I'm on a mission to rid the world of lazy leadership, because I found through my work, through my experience living overseas, that the world needs leaders who communicate clearly and directly. So when we look at strong leadership language, it's obviously the opposite of weak language. And weak language is really where people use conditional language. Typically, that comes from a place of fear. But that weak language, because people seem to understand what that means, so I always start with that first. But weak language is when you plant a seed of doubt in your audience's mind, and it puts you in a weak position. It puts you in this one down position. And so I often think of it's a weak language as conditional in the sense of I'm not convinced that I know what I'm talking about. And that's the message that I'm putting out there. So it may sound like I think this is a good idea, or I believe that maybe this will bring us success. But on the other hand, if we use strong leadership language, it's declarative in nature. It puts you in an influential position. So it sounds like I am convinced that this is the right approach. Or given my experience, I know that we can reach our goal if we take these actions. So the difference is really between conditional, which is weak, and declarative, which is strong.
Right. I'll come to that. So should a leader always carry some sort of a dictionary in hand, or in the mobile they download some thesaurus so that they can continue to look at which are the right kind of words to use, or you learn, it's a skill. Also, I want to understand when you talk about weak language, What about leaders also have to be diplomatic in today's time? See, the world
Absolutely.
has changed so much. He, him, so many. You can get confused. One may like something, one may not like something, and any word here and there can put you into a lot of trouble. So sometimes, you need to weigh each word that you speak out. So leadership is also not a easy thing in today's time. How do you calibrate these things and also make sure that you come out strong? How do you do
Right.
that?
Right. So it's practice, right? With everything that we do, it's practicing, it's being deliberate. So I said to you, I'm on a mission to rid the world of lazy leadership. Lazy leadership is not thinking about the words that we're using. It's not thinking about what's the message I want to get across. But instead, when you're deliberate with your words, yes, it does take time. It takes a little bit more effort. It takes thought. But what happens is then you're conscious of the impact you're having on the people, that your audience, whether it's an audience of one or of many. And so I like to think about, with my clients, I always say to them, don't come to me if you want to push the easy button, because it's not easy. All of this takes time, it takes thought, and definitely practice. So one of the things I always recommend to people is to practice in your writing. So review your language in an email, in a briefing, in if you're handwriting, God forbid, something, even in your texts, to think about, is this having the impact that I intend it to do? And, there's so many tools now that actually you can use, like Grammarly has a tone and a different settings that allow you to use a business setting, use an influential setting. So that gets rid of the weak language. So if you start seeing it and practicing in your writing and noticing perhaps what Grammarly is pulling out, or even if you contact me, I review emails from my clients all the time, and it really helps them. Oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. So practicing this is absolutely key. First of all, having the awareness, right? So you're listening to our conversation today, that's building your awareness. And then it's paying focused attention. Where am I using weak language? Who am I using weak language with? What are those circumstances or situations where I tend to lean that way? And then it's that practice, like continuous, deliberate practice. And maybe you have someone, a friend at work, someone you trust, who can then review things for you or pay attention in meetings where you may be using weak language, and they can point out to you those situations. Or maybe it's with one particular person that you tend to be play a little bit smaller, and they can point that out to you.
Okay, okay, Julie. So does it mean that the world is, tilted favorably towards people who are a bit more vocal, who are a bit more flashy, who are a bit more extrovert? What about the introverts? They can be very good leaders, people who know about but they are not, they don't speak too much. They know about stuff. You can't.
Right.
So how does that work out in today's time? Will introverts be in a disadvantageous position? But then they get the work done. So help us understand what is
Yes.
it there in terms of strong leadership, good leadership for the introverts.
Right. So, AJ, I actually find that introverts make some of the best leaders that I've seen and experienced and worked for, because they are phenomenal listeners. They are energized by listening. Where sometimes extroverts, myself included, sometimes I get so excited about a topic or passionate that I don't listen as well as I should. So I do find that introverts are phenomenal leaders. They ask really good questions. One of my clients, I said to her one day, I noticed her in a team. We were doing some team work. And I said to her, you ask phenomenal questions. She is a 100% introvert. At the end of the day, she's done. She wants to go home and just curl up and be by herself and read and fill her bucket back up. And what she said to me in response to when I said, you asked such great questions, she said, it's a little bit of a diversion tactic, because then other people are speaking and she doesn't have to be the one to speak. And because she's energized by listening as an introvert, then hearing what they have to say is really exciting for her. So in terms of strong leadership language, those same rules apply. In fact, I find that my introverts, they can grasp onto this really quickly because they edit and they draft what they're going to say before they say it. So this is an easy thing for them to do because they're naturally more thoughtful about the words that come out of their mouths. Now, I am kind of throwing a blanket on stereotypes of introverts and extroverts, and through my research, I now are seeing these ambiverts that in this situation I'm more extroverted, or when I'm in a small group I'm more extroverted, but in a big group I'm introverted. So really, for our listeners, is really paying attention to the circumstances, the situations, and the people, and just noticing, where am I using language that's effective and I'm being able to be influential, and where am I putting myself down a little bit, or questioning myself, or planting that seed of doubt in my audience.
Right, right, Julie. Let's understand this strong leadership word. What does strong leadership is all about? Is it about using difficult words? Why I ask this is that during the Great Resignation or the leadership challenges that we are facing today, one of the big questions that is coming is that leaders are not able to show that much of empathy that is required.
Right.
And you talked about Grammarly, you talked about artificial intelligence. They do not have that understanding of empathy or
Right.
feelings that much. So,
Right.
how does a leader who wants to be a strong leader, is a strong leader, wants to also make sure that his empathy or showing of empathy is not construed as weak leadership? How does one do that? How does one to be a strong leader and also look very, very human?
Right. So, bottom line, ask questions and practice curiosity over judgment. And that is the best way to show empathy. And what I find, and I talk a lot with my leaders and teams that I work with, is how are you building trust? And if you go back, because sometimes when people, certainly with the Great Resignation, AJ, like, show empathy. And for a lot of my leaders, they didn't know what that looked like, or what they thought was empathy was not landing as empathy. And so I always say to people, ask really good questions. Ask questions you don't know the answers to, and build trust by demonstrating that you truly care about your audience, and you care about them in a way that they feel that you don't have another agenda, that your agenda is their happiness, or if they are looking to build their career to get to the next level, that's how you are approaching the conversation. You're really asking them what matters to them, and not making assumptions on what you think they need or want or are interested in. And for instance, it came up with a client yesterday. He was talking about onboarding a new director, and he's very excited. She came highly recommended, and he created all of this great information for her. But the one question he hadn't thought to ask was, what does she need to be successful at his company? And so it's these little things that have a huge impact. So really thinking about, what are the questions I can ask to better understand this individual and to build trust with them.
Right, right. Uh, Julie, let me understand one more thing from you about leadership, strong leadership, and women leadership and men leadership. Men generally come out to look, perceived as a bit more strong, much more, much more with authority. What about women? When they start, they are considered to be a bit more understanding of things in a much more different way, positive way, feminine way, which is good. It brings a certain different sort of understanding to that whole thing.
Yes.
How do they at the same time look strong by using the right words, as well as at the same time do not look also to be negatively strong, and people perceive them in a much more different way? How does that happen?
Right. So the way I look at it, and what I have seen in the research, is that we need both, right? We need both of these behaviors. We need both of these communication styles, leadership styles, because we need cognitive diversity. We need, when we're solving problems, when we're being innovative, when we're, hopefully not going through another COVID type situation, but those moments where we have to make very quick decisions with not a lot of information. We need that diversity of thought, diversity of approach and communication and leadership. And what I have seen in that difference between men and women is that women have this greater vision. They're able to see so much more, oftentimes further ahead, but they're able to make connections which may seem disparate to others. And so having men and women in the conversation typically brings us to a place of a better solution, a better end game. And what I have, the other piece, so that's positive, that excites me. The other piece that I have seen, however, is that women have a much smaller amplitude to play in, where if they behave a certain way, they are seen as meek. And if they behave a certain way, they are seen as too aggressive, and far less kind words are shared. It's a much smaller amplitude that they can play in. Whereas men have a much bigger amplitude where they can play in, where they're seen as weak or way too aggressive and no one wants to work with them. And so how do we bring the men's amplitude in and bring the women's amplitude out is my goal in organizations. Having said that, in terms of strong leadership language, I have had this conversation with at conferences with companies, and I see men and women share where they have struggled and what language they have used mistakenly, where they have over apologized. And it's the same. They talk about the same examples. I do tend to draw more women to this conversation, but the men who come and share their examples, it's the same thing. So this is not gender specific. All leaders need to think about it. And what I hear in particular from the men is it's when they're around certain individuals that draw out the negativity and the weak language from them because they're in a place of fear. Bottom line, that's where it comes from.
Right, Julie. You talk about, trust from leadership, trusted leadership. That is going to be the future. What is this trust all about? Because you don't know many people in these job settings. So, what is this trust about? And how can a leader look trustworthy in a very short span of time? Because the situation is always so dynamic within the organization.
Yeah. So the way that I look at trust is I look at it in 4 ways. So it's with the individual, right? So it's how are they being hired? How are they showing up as an individual, regardless of their position? What are the questions they're asking? How are they thinking about what are the impact that I'm having on other people? And then I look at it from a leader perspective. So how am I leading a team? How am I showing up as a leader with my peers? And how am I leading up? Then I look at trust from a team perspective. So within the team, how are we building trust? And across teams, which oftentimes is forgotten. And that's why we go into these, what I often call cliques, right? Like back to middle school, high school, but we're creating these small buckets and we're not thinking about what's the impact that I have on this other team. And then looking, of course, as the organization as a whole, how are we building trust internally within our people, across teams, within teams, and even more importantly, externally. And the trust that exists when we think about our brand, our reputation, how we are known in our community, we have to look at all of these 4 avenues. And then I break it down and I say to my clients, what's the impact that you're having? And often it's this, there's a gap between our intentions and our impact. So we look at that. We look at what I call the titanium rule, which it builds on the golden rule. And the titanium rule is how you speak to others the way they want and need to be spoken to. And I look at leadership integrity. How are you showing up, whether that's internally, whether for yourself, with your teams, in the organization? How are you holding up the values of the organization? How are you holding up your own values? And when we look at all of these parameters that are like a DNA strand constantly interacting, then we can think about, how do I want to build trust? How do I show that I care? How do I show that I'm reliable and sincere and competent? And I'm going through this really quickly, but when we look at all of these different parameters, then we can think about how we truly build trust in an organization and between people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have explained things very, very well, Julie. And for more people will have to learn from you. This is one episode. There is so much to learn from you. So what is the best way for people to learn from you, to engage with you professionally?
Great. So visit me on LinkedIn. I have a monthly newsletter. So as soon as you connect with me, Julie Holunga, Holunga, then you'll be subscribed to my newsletter. Go to my website. There are lots of tools and resources that are on there that you can listen to and engage. And I would love to hear from the audience, perhaps some words that you've eliminated or something you're going to try using instead.
Wonderful. Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, AJ.